Hello everyone and welcome to Tom's Tomb of Horror. I hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for me to share my very own 2000s horror movies tier list. And I thought the 2000s was genuinely a really interesting time for horror because you had a lot of different things going on with the genre. You had the growth of extreme horror, you had found footage horror starting to really gain traction after the success of films like the Blair Witch Project, for example. I mean, you had remakes starting to come out more and more often, with American remakes of Japanese horror becoming a bit of a thing. You also had, I feel like, studios still trying to make money out of old franchise names like Halloween and Friday the 13th. So you had so many different things going on, lots to look out for. And for me, looking back with hindsight, this was the decade of horror that I first came to know. A lot of films coming out in this decade were my first horror films, or, and as a result, I have a warm affection towards a lot of these films, whether or not they're good or bad. So, do let me know in the comments what you think of my placements of each of these films, whether you agree or disagree. That's always the fun of doing this, I think, is that we don't all share the different opinions on films, art, and music, and so on. And if you're new to my channel, do drop a like and a sub. I'd really appreciate it. It supports everything I do here in the tomb. So let's crack on with this list because we've got quite a few films to get through here. And I'm going to start with 28 Days Later, which I think is an instant classic, particularly in the context of that this was one of the first kind of really big post-apocalyptic and zombie horror films of the 2000s that went on to influence a lot of other zombie and post-apocalyptic type films later in that decade and beyond, even influencing, I think, Walking Dead in the 2010s. And I think this is a really fantastic film directed by Danny Boyle that has a real, I feel like, a grim and dark reality about it that a lot of post-apocalyptic films that came before didn't really achieve so much. I mean, there was a certain Hollywood gloss and Hollywood sugarcoating. When if you really had a post-apocalyptic situation, it would be much more grim and darker than I think a lot of films that came prior to this. And I think that's what this film really achieved. So 28 Days Later for me is an instant classic. Final Destination 3 is next. This has really grown on me, and after rewatching this, this has gone up in my estimation again. Final Destination 3. I think this is great. I think it has a fantastic creative premonition sequence. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead really holds down the film in her performance as Wendy. And the supporting characters in this are actually kind of fun. I mean, sometimes extremely shallow, but you have actually got the couple that I really like in this one, Ian McKinley and Erin Ulmer, who are this cynical gothic kind of couple, but they are a great contrast to the other characters. And I really like the way that Ian McKinley's kind of arc develops in this film, in particular on rewatch. And as I say, I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead's fantastic. So Final Destination 3, Destination 3 has also got some really brutal kills. And really memorable ones. So, if you're going to Final Destination looking for classic Final Destination elements, I think this one serves them up brilliantly. Now, next up, I'm going to Rob Zombie's Halloween. And for me, this one doesn't do a whole lot for me, to be honest. But I do think it could be worse. I like that there's an effort to create a backstory to Michael Myers, although many people would say, does Michael Myers really need a backstory creating for him? But I think if you're going to try and do that, this one does make some reasonably commendable efforts to do that. But for me as a whole, the film doesn't really work. I do find Rob Zombie's Halloween films a little bit too dark, a little bit too, mean-spirited in a way, or too sort of nasty. And I've never kind of been a massive fan of these ones. So yeah, Rob Zombie's Halloween is going into could be worse. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, which I can have a bit of fun with. I find all of Erin's kind of running around kind of entertaining, if daft at the same time. But yeah, this one doesn't do too much for me. I'm always more likely to watch the original, to be honest, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'll be interested to see, I think, what Curry Barker does with this when a new one comes out. But yeah, that's gonna just go into could be worse than me. Don't get a whole lot out of that one, to be honest. Now, next up, we're going into the Saw franchise, which was a hugely successful franchise in the 2000s, and it's pretty iconic. Jigsaw is an iconic villain by this point. I don't think anybody would argue with that. So, Saw 3. Right, I think this is actually pretty solid. It's a little long, it's a little bloated, but you get quite a lot of Tobin Bell, which is always for me a boost in any Saw films. I think you actually have a pretty good storyline and thread through this film with Jeff's character, even though he's kind of slow and frustrating at times. I do really like the thread. and the sort of understandable, the empathy you have really that you develop for him with, the death of his son and the choices and that he has to make through his tests, which are, pretty brutal. Let's be honest here. I do think that you can develop a lot of empathy for him as he kind of goes through these tests, and there are some really nasty traps. And this was where sort of took the torture porn to a new level, I thought as well. So that may not be so much your thing, which is why I think Saw 3 often gets sort of rated very low. But I do think it's actually one of the better ones in the franchise. Not one of my personal favorites. I wouldn't say I get a huge amount of personal enjoyment out of Saw 3, but I do respect it as an entry in the franchise. Next up, we go into Ginger Snaps, which I think I've now, confession to make, I only saw this for the first time pretty recently, but I thought it was pretty fantastic. The chemistry on screen with Emily Perkins and Catherine Isabel is quite something to watch. And this film has all these kind of um, undercurrents of, puberty and teenage angst and putting those things in parallel with kind of growing up with werewolves, and watching Catherine Isabella's Ginger, her transformation into a werewolf is quite fascinating, and seeing her personality really get affected by that and change her choices, and kind of makes the relationship between her and her sister all the more interesting as well. I think it's a brilliant one. This one, I'm going to put it, even though I'm new to it, I can understand why people regard it as a cult classic, and I feel therefore justified in now having seen it, being able to make that call that I do think that this is actually, I can see why this is a cult classic. It really impressed me with its rawness, and it being unafraid to go to places I think a lot of films would actually be afraid to go, perhaps now even. So, I mean, I think Ginger Snaps was a really, really great film. Now I'm talking about The Ring from 2002, which I did put a little poll on my community page if you want to see that, whether or not you think The Ring is, great or, not so good, or different categories I put up for a poll on this film, because I found it interesting to watch this one again. I think Naomi Watts is actually pretty great. And looking at who else was considered for this role, I think she was the best choice. Because Naomi Watts has a way about her. She plays Rachel in this, and she has a way about her that is kind of like curious and serious and introspective. And I think she gets all of those things, qualities across in her character, which works so well for a film where it's sort of investigating a mysterious kind of videotape that, curses you and you end up dying after 7 days. And I think that she kind of embodies everything I'd want to see out of a character in that kind of role. She is superb, and she is the reason why I'm actually going to put this film into great. I think it has its issues. I don't think it's as good as the Japanese original, which you should watch if you've never seen the Japanese original. I think the Japanese original is just fantastic, and that would go into classic if I had that on here. But this remake from 2002, from the 2000s, this American remake, I still think it's very good in its own right. It's a really good effort. And as I say, Naomi Watts is superb. The Hills Have Eyes is next. Not a film that personally I really like much. I do think it has, it's nasty, basically. And as a trigger warning for people that aren't familiar with Hills of Eyes and this remake, it has a lot of essay. And and too much of that. I mean, I've watched a lot of horror with that in, but there's so much of it in this film. I think it's just very uncomfortable. And I personally, although there is a brutal savagery, and the savages are who they are, there's no sugarcoating. These are nasty savages, and they'll do whatever they want. But I don't know, it doesn't really work for me as it's not enjoyable. So I'm putting it in could be worse because I'm just not really one to really. I don't really like the Hills of Ice films much, period, to be honest, which is a bit of a spoiler for the one that comes later on. All right, so next up, we've got another one which is widely regarded as a cult classic, The Mist. I personally never thought of this as necessarily a perfect film, but I think it's got, a really great ending, which, if you watch for the first time, I feel like dark and brutal endings were becoming a thing in the 2000s. And this one certainly made itself a name for the ending it has, which if you've not seen, I won't give it away to avoid any spoilers. But for me, it lies somewhere between classic and great. I can see myself getting lots of complaints if I don't put this into classic. I mean, I do think that Thomas Jane is absolutely brilliant in this film. He's kind of the hero of the piece, trying to work through a really tough situation with everybody kind of, trapped or shutting themselves off in that supermarket when you got all sorts of weird things happening in the mist outside and some really intense scenes. You've also got a lot of the cast of The Walking Dead in this one, like Melissa McBride, and she's good in this. You've got Jeffrey DeMunn and Laurie Holden, who's going to come up again in another film or two, I feel, on this tier list. She's really good in this as well. And yeah, it's a classic. It's a cult classic. So I'm going to put it into classic, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be of the classic tiers one which would be the top. I do think it has one or two slight things about it that I think I'm personally less keen on. And the CGI hasn't dated all that well, for example, on this either. Next up, we've got AVP. For me, I actually think AVP is solid. I do. I think this is solid. I think it gets quite a lot of hate, but I enjoy it for what it is. It's basically doing what I would want of an Alien versus Predator film to be a good mashup of Aliens and Predator and have them going face to face and making that a spectacle, which I think this film achieves. I also quite like the final girl as well, played by Sana Lathan. I might have to check I've got her name right. I think she's really good, and I like the cast of characters generally. I do think they're good enough. There's not a whole lot of depth here, but are you really going to Aliens versus Predator looking for a really deep storyline, or are you actually going to a film like this looking for a lot of action and a good time? I know what I'm looking for, and I think it's solid at achieving that. Now we go to House of Wax. You know what? I'm going to put this in solid as well, and I think this has some pretty terrifying moments in. I do also really like Carly and Nick, who, if I remember right, were siblings in this. I really like their kind of escape scene towards the end. Jared Padalecki has a really nasty death in this one as well. That's a bit of a spoiler, isn't it? I should maybe put a spoiler warning at the start. But yeah, that kind of has stuck with me. The reason I say that, and I think that's a really memorable part of House of Wax. Also, you have Paris Hilton, who I think does a respectable performance. I know she got a lot of hate back in the day. Really, I don't think that was anything to do with House of Wax. I just think that was Paris Hilton and all the commentary on her. But actually, she's pretty good in this film. She does a respectable performance, I think. And I think House of Wax overall, as it's a remake, if I recall, is actually it's pretty good. So it's going into solid. All right, we go to the original Saw next. And I think, I think it is a classic. I mean, it's a really massive film in 2000s horror and really influential on a low budget. What, James Wan and Lee Winnell managed to do with Saw is pretty legendary by this point, isn't it? With quite a minimalist kind of setup. Um, but the two guys trapped in the bathroom with a whole lot of background going on, and Jigsaw lying dead in the middle of the floor. With all this film is steeped in mystery. It's sinister. It sort of for me carries qualities of both the sinister elements of Seven and Cube's kind of trap setup, and it made great with those things. And Saw is for that reason a real classic, original. And yeah, for a moment I was thinking the acting's not so good, so you could argue this is just great and not a classic. But I think its influence forces me to put it into the classic tier. All right, Jason X. Could this one be the first one that goes into Kill Me Now? I don't think it is going to go into Kill Me Now. I think it's a huge amount of fun, this film. It certainly is not a great film. It's like a B movie. It has a ton of problems, and but are you really gonna go to Jason X to analyze it and wear your film critic hat? I mean, in my case, a little bit like with AVP. I know what I'm getting out of this film. It's stupid sci-fi sort of um, Jake Friday the 13th fun with all kinds of weird shit happening in space, and so Jason X is. Going into good, be worse. Right, Slither. Um, I really like Elizabeth Banks, so I'm conscious that maybe has a little bit of an effect on where I've placed this one in solid. It's pretty good body horror. It's pretty slimy. It's pretty disgusting, but it does what it achieves again pretty well. I think that you have some good comedy elements here, some dark comedy, and some pretty gruesome scenes that carry themselves well. Some good characterization. Yeah, so Slither I think is going into solid. Now we have Spanish found footage classic Wreck, which, as far as found footage films, this one goes. This one's fantastic. I think it's short, it's to the point, it's rapid paced. The performances are great. I can't quite remember the actress's name off the top of my head. Something like Angela Velasco, something like that. Um, but this is so good at what it does. You know, it takes the sort of scary elements of found footage and maximizes them, takes them to, their sort of intense limits, if you like, with some of the shock scares in this as well, which are incredible. And I just like the way it kind of everything unfolds in such a chaotic fashion. I mean, rather like it might if you had this situation unfolding. And I just think it works so well as found footage horror. So yeah, it's a classic to me. I loved this when I first saw it. Now we have Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which is going to be the first film. I'm sorry, Rob Zombie Halloween fans. But yeah, this is just my opinion, obviously, and I don't really like this one much at all, the Halloween 2 Zombie. It's just carnage all the way through, carnage candy, which, at first I was kind of like, okay, this is going to be brutal. I don't mind a bit of brutality, but it sort of really just carries on with the gore to the point that the gore becomes less and less effective. I also think the sort of general story and narrative of this one kind of tires itself out very quickly. I just find very little I like about Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie, which is why that one has gone into Kill Me Now. I wouldn't say, despite it going into the bottom tier, that I hate it, but I'm not going to watch this, to be honest, unless I'm doing like a Halloween marathon like I did fairly recently for a ranking. But yeah, now we move on to another 28 film, 28 Weeks Later, which is a bit of a personal favourite of mine at this point. So, another disclaimer, I'm a pretty big Rose Byrne fan, and also I think Jeremy Renner is in this, and he's really good too. And they're both quite heroic characters with the two children who are Tammy and Andy. And I kind of like the non-stop action sequences in this film and how intense they are. And the intensity sort of, when I watched this film, I rewatched it the other day, I could not stop. It had me glued the whole way through. Um, of course, therefore, it lacks the suspense and the sort of some more of the creepy psychological emotional intensity perhaps that 28 Days Later had, but it is so thrilling all the way through, I think. And I also think the opening sequence is one of the best ever opening sequences that you could get in a horror film. And the sort of Don arc is quite interesting, whether or not there's a lot of debate online whether Don was really a coward or whether he was actually making a realistic decision, knowing that he had his two children to find, but then again, he abandoned his wife in that situation. So there's a kind of like there's different camps on Don, which I find quite interesting online and discourse. Do look that up if you're interested. I personally can't believe he left his wife, but I can understand also that it was a bit of a fight or flight situation. So I'm a little bit split on that myself. I don't think he should have left his wife in the way he did, but there are all sorts of arguments out there against that as well. Um, so yes, that's my 28 weeks later thoughts. I think it's excellent. I do recommend if you've only seen 28 days later and you've missed out on 28 weeks later, you are sleeping on a fantastic horror film here. Next up, we've got Hostel Part 2. I'm going to put this one in could be worse. I think the Hostel films, the first one for me is the one that sort of was always going to stand out the most in my memory. This one took the nastiness to another level, I think, particularly with Heather Matarazzo's character, who is hanging upside down in the film poster there. That is like one of the nastiest scenes I think I've seen in all my horror viewing over time. It's pretty uncomfortable, not for the faint-hearted. But I kind of like this film actually as it goes on with Beth's arc and how that develops. The sort of the feminist element of her arc is quite interesting towards the end. So I don't know. There are some moments of this film I actually quite like, but it's very dark, it's very brutal and mean spirited, and that certainly isn't for everybody. So Hostel Part Two is going into could be worse. Now we have Final Destination, the original. Is it really a classic? I mean, to be honest, it sort of is a 2000s classic, but the classic tier I've got to treat as I think what are the really true influential classics. And I think Final Destination, as consistent as it is, I think the original isn't quite true classic material. I think it's classic almost as a franchise, but I don't think this first film is that great. I think some of the acting is a little bit off. I think that, it could have been better developed at times, although I do love, and I have sung praises of how much I love Devon Sawa and Ali Larter as Alex Browning and Clear Rivers, and they are an all-time favorite couple for me. If go and watch that video on couples if you want to see me talk more about that. And it is a great film, but it's not for me quite an all-time classic. I'm sure many would disagree with me on that, but you look at the top tier of films there, and for me, it's just a shade off that, but it's still a great film and a horror staple in the 2000s. Okay, we seem to be skipping ahead here a bit to the Final Destination, I think that one is, which is not one I like much at all. In fact, the only stinker for me in all of the Final Destination franchises, the Final Destination 3D. Wasn't so keen on or many of the characters, if any of them. I thought the lead was okay. Was it Nick Bannon, something like that? I thought he was all right. Um, but the whole CGI premonition sequence I thought was terrible. It was absolutely awful. And Final Destination, I feel like the thing that really starts them off, if they start off well with a great premonition sequence, it really sets the tone for the rest of the film. Like Final Destination 2 and 3, they had amazing premonition sequences. And the most recent one was pretty cool as well. Although I kind of had my slight qualm with that one, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, don't like Final Destination 4. Shallow characters, too, just too predictable and terrible CGI, is why I'm putting that one in to kill me now. Paranormal Activity is next. I think this is actually, as far as the Paranormal Activity goes, I feel like the original is pretty solid, and I do really like the last final kind of. I know a lot of people say the best bit of the film is the end. I would agree with that. And I think that leaves a pretty solid positive impression for me of this film. You do have to be very patient with these kind of films, but I kind of enjoyed the first one. I thought Katie Featherstone was very good actually in her role as the lead. Um, and for that reason, yeah, Paranormal Activity, I kind of enjoy it. I think it's a good slow burn found footage that, you can just kind of switch off your concentration a bit and just watch it kind of go on and fly by, almost kind of chill for me until the very end, which is kind of disturbing. Now we have The Descent. Now, who remembers my videos on the Green Man on my other channel about The Descent? You know where this is going. This can only go into the classic. This is actually, I'm even putting it above 28 Days Later, this one, because this is how much I love The Descent. What a great cast of characters you've got here. Great performances, serious emotional depth with Sarah's kind of arc and story here. Intensely claustrophobic caves, brilliantly developed and unveiled monsters, seriously disturbing scenes. Got everything you could pretty much want from a horror film, this does. And it almost has a little bit of a feel of 1979's Alien for me, with the terror and the sort of unfolding terror chaos of this film. You know, Absolutely stunning film, I think, and I love the ending as well, and all of the different character aspects and dynamics that are sort of always under the sort of in the main sort of under, I guess, the main thread of the film as well. So yeah, really great film. Now we're going to talk about Freddy versus Jason, and I'm going to say two words here to sum up why actually I kind of like this film. Gib Smith, one of my all-time favorite characters, and yes, she dies pretty quickly. Spoiler alert again, but she's one of the reasons I really like this. In fact, I kind of like the trio of Gib, Kia, and temporarily her name is it Laurie? Her name's temporarily gone. The final girl in this one. I like their dynamics and their chemistry, um, as well as the obviously the spectacle of Freddy versus Jason. I actually kind of like the group. They sort of embody this 2000s party girl kind of vibe, which I kind of looking back really enjoy watching that now and just how, their dynamic and how it works and how kind of carefree they are. And it's very interesting. And I think how that plays against, the backdrop of Freddy versus Jason. It's a shame with Jason that he didn't come across as well as Freddy did, because Freddy was, Robert Englund in his element through a lot of the film, which I also think lifts it up a bit. It does have its problems. It's really shallow moments, this film, and yeah, it does have issues for sure. But Freddy versus Jason also, I think, is a good amount of fun, which is why I kind of changed my mind slightly on it. It has grown on me a little bit over time. And as I say, I do think the Gibbs Smith factor is a massive reason why this hasn't ended up in a lower tier because Gibbs Smith, Catherine Isabel, come on, Catherine Isabel. Where are the Catherine Isabel fans and Gibbs Smith fans to support me on this one? She's such an awesome character. Come on, come on. All right, next up, we're talking about Silent Hill, the first Silent Hill film movie directed by Christoph Gans. Now, there's been an awful lot of chat about the recent one. I'm not going to go into all of that here. I do think this is the most highly respected of the Silent Hill films, and actually of video game adaptations. This one still has quite a laudable amount of respect. I mean, in the circumstances where these films, particularly the other Silent Hill films, have been absolutely trashed. But I think this one is genuinely great. I'm not going to say it's quite a classic, but I think it's genuinely great. I think, the dialogue is better than the other films. Generally, the scripts, the continuity, the narrative is stronger, with the sort of religious and supernatural sort of story behind this. Um, and I think that, Radha Mitchell did a good job in the lead role. Not one of Sean Bean's better moments for me in the Silent Hill films. But yeah, it's overall pretty solid. I love Laurie Holden in this film as well. She's great. As the cop, Sybil. I think she's really good. And yeah, it's got the creepiness. It also, I think, does as good, if not the best, out of capturing the atmosphere of the games too. Yeah, I love the original Silent Hill. I think it's great. Next up, we got Saw 6. Now, I think this is great as well. And I'll tell you why I love Saw 6. It's a late entry, and I feel like it's a more original, unique spin on the whole Saw concept, having somebody having to make choices as to who lives and who dies. And that person is not Jigsaw or one of the villains. It is this guy, William Eastman, who's this insurance chief exec or something. Can't remember exactly what his job title is, but it presents a different slant to us. And I think it is really, really, yeah, really good actually at what it does. So Saw 6 is going into great. All right, we move on to Rec 2 now. So I think this is going to go into great as well. I think this is another really good sort of found footage romp, if you like, with all sorts of chaos unfolding. It almost has a Zach Cregger element. I can't remember the year this film came out. Was it 2009 or something, Rec 2? But it has like a Zach Cregger element because you have the meetings or two timelines going on in the film that eventually come to meet each other. And it's very effective. I think it works quite well in Rec 2, and I think it's almost as good as Rec 1, but I found Rec 1 to have that sort of originality and authority in performances just that little more for me. Next up, we've got Hostel. This is the original Hostel, isn't it? Now, some people would put this in classic or even great. I don't think this is a great film as such as Hostel. I think it's an important one in the 2000s, again, being a bit of a marker for, let's put it a little bit higher actually, for being a marker in 2000s brutality and extreme horror and being absolutely terrifying when it needs to be. Um, it's awful what happens to these guys. And, the first 45 minutes is just sleazy, kind of them just having fun in a brothel or something like that, isn't it? I can't remember exactly the details, but, it kind of starts off, I think, as a pretty like a just kind of a sleazy, cheesy B movie, but it develops into the horror really well, I think, and the extreme sort of gore of this is taken to another level. Again, it's nasty, it's mean-spirited. You expect that from Eli Roth. I think you can't go into an Eli Roth film expecting a nice kind of jolly bit of spoof horror or anything like that, or light-heartedness. You generally get some pretty in-your-face brutality, and that's what you get with Hostel. So it's going into solid because I don't think it's actually that great a film, but I do think it's an important one in a way for the genre in the 2000s context. So next up we go up to Hills and Eyes 2. Kill Me Now for me, don't get much. I don't even really remember this film. I didn't bother rewatching it for this tier list in fairness to the film, but I do remember not really liking it and it having lots of issues. So Hills Have Eyes, as I said, not really into the Hills of Ice films very much, the remakes. Yeah, so it's going into the bottom tier, that one. Friday the 13th, 2009. I'm tempted to put this into great, actually, particularly for the open sequence with Jason causing mayhem. I mean, isn't it just the best of all the Friday the 13th opening sequences? That opener, those first scenes, I think they're tremendous. And get the, sort of, yeah, he's nasty, but they get Jason really menacing. And, there's a little bit of an element of humor about it as well at times, I think. And this film has, the usual shallow cast of characters. That's nothing new in Friday the 13th films, but I think the whole spectacle of Jason and the action scenes, the kills are all really strong here. And, for me, I go to Friday the 13th for that, really. Yeah, I mean, there's the usual other stuff going on here, but it's a great film. No, is it really a great film? I'm putting it to great out of my enjoyment of it, to be honest. But yeah, I'm putting it to great. That's just my decision. That's my decision, and it's final. Final Destination 2. Um, yeah, another great one. And like kind of like I said with Final Destination 3, I will say I think I like this very slightly more than this third one at the moment, but I'm a little bit fluid when it comes to the Final Destination films and ranking them. Kimberly Coleman, final girl here, and Thomas. I like their dynamic and relationship personally. I know a lot of people personally are quite critical of them, I think, in the franchise, all their characters and the acting, but I think that they're fine and I think it works. And I like the way that the lore is slightly explored a bit further with Final Destination 2 as well, with a whole kind of resurrection element to it. And as I said, the premonition sequence sets the tone for these films. And the log truck scenes at the start, absolutely terrifying and have impacted a generation of us to not want to drive behind log trucks ever. Right. Okay, next up, we've got Halloween Resurrection. Oh, kill me now. Kill me now. I'm sorry. Laurie Strode's killed off in the early part of this film. I mean, you got the Busta Rhymes stuff. It's goofy. It's reality TV inspired because you had all the reality TV stuff. It just represents the worst of the 2000s in that way. No, just no. Resurrection, I can understand if this is a guilty pleasure for you because I can see the guilty pleasure elements of it, but not for me. It's just kill me now territory. All right, AVP2 next. Kill me now. Kill me now. Can't see much at all in this film. It's kind of gross. It's not serving much for me in Aliens or Predator films. I say that the hybrid thing is kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. That's about it when it comes to Requiem. Going into Kill Me Now. But you know what? I'll put this a little bit higher up in Kill Me Now. 30 Days of Night, a film that I think was. I think this one. I know lots of you love this because you voted this the highest in my poll of choices of horror films. I've only seen this recently for the first time. I thought it was solid. I thought it was really solid. I liked Josh Hart and Melissa George, and they're sort of. I felt there was a cool little bit of chemistry there with them on screen, and it's a very cold film. It's very isolating because it is, about an Alaskan town in 30 Days of Night, with these really kind of nasty vampires. I feel like the vampires' nastiness is ramped up to the max in this one. These are mean vampires, I will say that. But for me, it's a little. I don't think slow is the word, or the pacing is necessarily the problem for me. It's just I found the film so cold and so serious that it was a little bit like I wasn't sort of engaged by a whole lot throughout the film. But I thought it was solid enough and commendable enough in respect to performances and ideas. But yeah, just not so much for me for whatever reason. Coming up next, we've got Saw 2 and uh mm, mm. This is a personal favorite of mine, but I'm just debating whether or not it really is classic. Oh, I think it has to be. And here's why I think Saw 2 could be regarded as classic. I think it does, it's a more intense version, more fast-paced version of the first film, with still a great twist ending. I really like the characters in this one and their threads, each of them, even if they're nasty pieces of, I still really enjoy following them. And I like the little twists, as I say, and the brutality, the traps in this one are really good as well. You know, if you are looking for great traps in Saw, I think Saw 2 has a fair offering of those. Um, you know, if you're sick and twisted, maybe like me, enjoying these films, I think it has quite a lot to offer in that respect too. I think overall, Saw 2 is a classic. It's a great sequel. It is an all-time favorite sequel of mine. So yeah, I've given in and I have put it back into classic. Although I can see chinks in the armor, I can see why people might not regard Saw 2 as necessarily perfection. But for me, it's great. Okay, Saw 4, one of my least favorite Saw films, but still not quite kill me now. I'm going to put it into could be worse. The Officer Rig thing was not very well thought out for me. His story, and could have been better sort of built up. And I do like the final scenes of Saw 4. It is where torture porn kind of, what this franchise was now by this point known for was the brutal traps, and it took that to the next level, I feel like deliberately. Um, but for me, because of that, the narrative, the strengths of the previous film, the sort of sinister, creepy, claustrophobic elements, for me, what I felt the grimness of those previous films was kind of lost a little bit by this point because they just kind of focused. I feel like it was just became so much more gore based and just kind of got carried away with that and they lost the writing a little bit for me by Saw 4. So yeah, could be worse. Not a terrible film though, I don't think. Certainly not a terrible film. Okay, is it time for another classic, everybody? Is it time for another 2000? I think it is. I think it's Drag Me Tell. What an awesome film this one is. Terrifying. Was that Mrs. Ganoush? Miss Ganoush? Oh, she's absolutely terrifying in this film. Love the character, the Christine Brown. I mean, you sort of, if I remember rightly, I'll admit I regard this as a classic, but I haven't watched it super recently, so I can't quite remember all the twists and turns in it. But I remember like the kind of lead is you're sort of not totally sure how much you want to side with her or be a bit sort of side with her character, but I think she's fascinating to watch. And her performance is very enticing. I think she's absolutely brilliant, this actress. I'm gonna have to briefly look up her name because I can't not credit this actress. I think she's fantastic. So I'm just going to temporarily look her up. Drag Me to Hell, 2009. It's Alison Lohman. That's the name. I knew it was in the back of my mind somewhere. Alison Lohman. I think she's fantastic in Drag Me to Hell, and I think it is a genuine 2000s classic. That moves us on to the last film in the list, which is Saw 5. Again, for me, could be worse. In fact, I think not just that this film could be worse, I think it could have been a hell of a lot better because I personally really liked the Strom and Hoffman rivalry, which a lot of people don't like, but I really liked the rivalry element. I just think that the film kind of got lost between the Fatal Five and the Strom and Hoffman thing going on, and I think it would have been better just focusing on Strom and Hoffman because I do think there was a lot of meat to that sort of thread and that story, and could have made this one a bit of a banger in the franchise. But as it was a little bit stale in the end. Um, Although that final scene with Hoffman winning is quite something, and it is certainly a highlight in the franchise with the coffin, the glass coffin sequence, right? You know what I'm talking about if you've seen that. So Yeah, Saw 5 could be worse, and I think it had a lot of potential to be a lot better, that one. It's a shame that it couldn't have been better because I think it had the makings of a Saw classic, but they didn't quite pull it off for me. So, all right, thanks very much. We got to the end of this tier list. So, let me know what you think of this. It's kind of a pretty good distribution. I mean, slightly top heavy maybe, but I do like I say, I have a warm affection towards a lot of these films. So let's just go back through the classics quickly. I mean, The Descent, 28 Days Later, Ginger Snaps, The Mist, Saw, Wreck, Saw 2, and Drag Me to Hell. You don't beat those. Come on. I want to see some arguments on this one, but you don't beat those, do you? Really? Those are classics to me. In great, we've got Final Destination, the original, Final Destination 2 and 3, all in greats here. The consistency of this franchise is pretty unmatched. I think high quality horror, not perfect, but high quality. The Ring 2002, Naomi Watts, fantastic in that. 28 Weeks Later, underrated. Love Rose Byrne, Jeremy Renner. It's two of my favourite actors, actually, period. Silent Hill, Saw 6, Wreck 2, Friday the 13th remake, all for me. Close to classics, great watches, really good fun. Go watch them if you haven't seen them already. And then obviously we've got Solid, we've got Saw 3, Hostel, AVP, House of Wax, 30 Days a Night, a favourite of lots of you out there, I know. Slither, Paranormal Activity, and Freddy versus Jason, all good fun, those films, but not necessarily great films, but fun at a certain level. I think now we got the ones that I don't really like so much. So you got your Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Remake, Hills of Eyes, Saw 5, Jason X, Hostel Part 2, and Saw 4. And then the ones that really are the bottom of the barrel, maybe of the 2000s, perhaps you could say, or at least this is my view on these: Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, AVP Requiem, The Final Destination, Hills of Ice 2, and Halloween Resurrection. I want to hear from you if you like these films or not. Otherwise, yeah, that's it for now. I enjoyed doing this. Hope you enjoyed watching it. But for me, until next time, everybody, it is bye for now.